Hello again friends. In this video I want to explain why I think that Metro Exodus is a true innovation on the first two games. I discovered the Metro games a few years ago when 2033 was free on Xbox through Games with Gold. When I started playing it, the first thing I noticed was that the game was clunky, slow, and genuinely uncomfortable to play. It was love at first sight. I'm the type of masochistic motherfucker who plays the Halo campaigns with 7 skulls on, and who once installed so many combat mods in Skyrim that I had a negative kill-death ratio. In my opinion, too many games are obsessed with capturing a power fantasy and making the player feel like a god. Most modern first-person shooters offer you ridiculously powerful weapons, then give the player a fucking standing ovation for pointing it in the middle of their screen and pressing a single button. But when playing the Metro games, you'll find yourself barely scraping up enough rounds for a janky piece of shit metal pretzel the game calls a gun. And after using your last medkit, inhaling your last minute of oxygen, and reloading your last 7 bullets, the game thinks it's the perfect time to make you fight a giant flying demonic mutant gargoyle sent straight from hell. The only time that Metro pulls your ass out of the mud is when it wants to laugh in your face as it pushes you back in. These are the reasons why I love the Metro games, since while most modern FPS games are content treating their player base like the babies that they are, the Metro games tell you to grow the fuck up. So when I first saw the Metro Exodus reveal trailer at E3, I was pretty stoked. Seeing Artyom take off his mask on the surface was as much of a breath of fresh air for me as it was for him. But personally, I was also a little worried that the change in setting and more open nature of the game would take away from the tense survival gameplay that I loved about the first two games. However, not only can I say that these worries have been laid to rest, but I would actually say that the survival scavenging nature of the game has been greatly improved. The more open-ended level design of Metro Exodus isn't a cheap selling point on the box or a way to cash in on the open world trend, but rather, it's the defining innovation of the game. One of the problems with the previous Metro games is that their linear nature led to the resource scavenging aspect of the game feeling very handcrafted. You could clearly see that the developers purposely placed the necessary resources that the player would need to accomplish their goal, since if they didn't, it would feel like the game was punishing the player for no reason. In this way, I would argue that the linear level design of the previous Metro games kinda took away from the resource management and scavenging mechanics. But in Exodus, each of the open levels has both various different activities to complete, and a total amount of resources that can be gathered in the environment. This means that all the activities in each level share the same resource pool, meaning that the player will have to make a lot of hard decisions about when and where they expend their resources. Something as mundane as alerting a pack of watchmen has a massive impact on how you will proceed through the rest of the level. In one situation, I had spent about half an hour scavenging some supplies to create another mag of ammo for my assault rifle, only for me to alert some mutants and blow the vast majority of it trying to survive. It was pretty frustrating, not gonna lie, but it taught me an important lesson, and now I'm the stealthiest Ruski in Mother Russia with the throwing knife skills of a fucking circus performer. Between the open-ended level design and the new crafting system, the world of Metro Exodus is littered with player choice that will have a massive impact on your moment-to-moment gameplay. I hope this doesn't count as a spoiler, but one of the minor side missions tasks you with retrieving a teddy bear for a little girl. Seems easy enough, until you realize that the teddy bear is located in the middle of a fucking mutant's nest. So you need to choose whether or not you rush over to the teddy bear, gather some supplies first, or even choose to forego the side mission altogether. Another example of choices you will need to make relate to which weapons you want to use in a given situation. In my experience, the bullet weapons are extremely effective, but cost a lot more supplies to properly maintain. Unlike previous Metro games, in Exodus you can carry 3 weapons instead of 2. So one of the weapons that I carry with me at all times is the Dakar pneumatic rifle. This heap of steaming shit will instantly remind you of an airsoft gun, not only with how it functions, but also in how much damage it deals. But although this gun is total ass, it's one mighty fine ass. The big advantage this weapon has over all the others is that its ammo is super cheap to craft, which means that you'll be relying on it quite often so that you don't burn through your supplies. However, this weapon can be quite inconsistent and tricky to use, and the bullet weapons are far more reliable. But this leads to yet another choice you will need to make. One of the new mechanics that Exodus introduces is weapon maintenance. As you use your weapon, it will rapidly become dirty, leading to jams and malfunctions. You can clean your weapons at workbenches, however, This will consume a fuck ton of valuable crafting chemicals. These same chemicals are used to craft medkits, gas mask filters, ammo, and explosives. You need to decide which of these items you need the most, and maybe it isn't the best idea to spend your chemicals cleaning a weapon you have no ammo for. In previous Metro games, I was almost always carrying the maximum capacity of all of these supplies, but in Exodus, I really struggle to have more than one medkit. Another interesting mechanic in the game is the dynamic day and night cycle. In a lot of games I wonder why the developers bothered to include a day-night cycle, as it has little to no practical impact on the gameplay experience. But in Metro Exodus, there are very distinct gameplay differences between day and night. During the day, the mutants are a lot less frequent and easy to see, making them fairly easy to avoid. However, patrols of enemy factions are much harder to sneak past, and stealth is overall a lot more difficult. So when you're about to take on a mission, you need to ask yourself when the best time to attack is. Many other games have attempted similar mechanics, but I think that Metro Exodus is the first game I've played where I really noticed the difference. In the desert level, for example, the environment is very open, making stealth nearly impossible to pull off during the daytime. The Metro games have always made their players respect the environment that they're in, and the day-night cycle adds another layer on top of previously established mechanics. But I also want to mention one last choice that the game asks you to make, and I find this one quite unique and interesting. In a level called the Volga, you can choose to traverse the environment by boat or by foot. If you choose to travel by boat, you are almost guaranteed to get attacked by shrimps. These ugly hentai pieces of shit are a pain in the ass, but are relatively easy to kill. If however you decide to travel by foot, it will take you much longer to get to your destination, and you risk being spotted by mutants. Fighting off a horde of watchmen can be massively draining on your supplies, but if you're sneaky enough you can avoid them. As the player, you will need to decide whether or not you use a few of your supplies to travel quickly by boat, or risk expending a lot of your supplies by traveling overland. But these are only a sample of the meaningful gameplay choices you will need to make, and there are plenty more for you to discover yourself. Many of these can have a pretty severe impact on the characters, story, and even the ending of the game, and decision-making is a pretty integral part of the experience. The last thing I want to touch on in this video is the difficulty. The Metro games have a few different difficulty options that you can easily separate into two categories. There's the way the game was meant to be played, aka Ranger Hardcore, and then there's various different degrees of bitch mode. Personally, I have absolutely no desire to play Metro on the lower difficulties, as I feel it's a diet version of what the game truly is. However, if you are new to the series you should probably play on the lower difficulties, as Ranger Hardcore will probably be a bit too much for you, as it was for me when I first played 2033. But moving on, one of the things that I love about the Metro games is how they don't artificially inflate the difficulty by making enemies bullet sponges. Even on the hardest difficulty, I can still kill most enemies with only a few bullets. There are some boss-style enemies with a fuck ton of health, but they never really feel bullet spongy to me, since you can still kill them in a reasonable amount of time with headshots and good grenade placement. When you increase the difficulty in Metro, there are three main changes that you will notice in-game. The first is that you have significantly less health, making medkits and stealth much more important. The second is that supplies are much more scarce, making exploration and scavenging vital to success. And lastly, the enemies are much more aware of the player, making stealth more challenging and preventing you from just stealth cheesing every encounter. Between these three changes, I feel that the Metro games achieve much more meaningful differences between their various different difficulties. In my opinion, the most important of these changes is the scarcity of supplies. The reason I say this is because I feel that the best aspects of the Metro games are immersion and environmental storytelling, and encouraging players to scavenge for supplies pushes them to explore every little nook and cranny. It's a way of using gameplay mechanics to help accent the other elements of the game, and I find this type of mechanical interplay to be quite rare in modern shooters. This is why I say that Ranger Hardcore is the way that Metro is meant to be played, since it's the difficulty level that takes the most advantage of the gameplay mechanics to reinforce its world and storytelling. Not to say that the other difficulties don't have their place, but I view them more as practice for Ranger Hardcore than a standard difficulty option. But in my opinion, the new mechanics introduced in Exodus help the game to highlight the strengths of the series better than the previous games. The open-ended level design, weapon degradation, and crafting add a whole new layer of depth on top of the previous game's already excellent core mechanics. Some may criticize these changes, saying that they force players to spend too much time managing and collecting supplies. But I personally love and have embraced this aspect of the gameplay, even if at times you could call the game Mushroom Harvesting Simulator 2019. I don't want to imply that I think the game is perfect, and it still has a few of the flaws of the previous games. One thing that has always bothered me about the Metro games is how your character never fucking talks, even when asked a direct question. While this was present in the previous games, in Exodus it's on a whole new level entirely. It's particularly noticeable whenever your wife Anna talks to you. It's clear from the dialogue that she really loves and cares for Artyom even though he refuses to even talk to her. It makes Anna seem like a batshit crazy fangirl who's in love with a murderous psychotic mute. But this is easy to look past since there's an implied relationship between the two characters, even if it isn't really explored in-game. It's just kind of odd since Artyom talks when writing his journal entries in between missions, but never says a fucking word to anyone. The other pretty serious problem I ran into was that my game would occasionally crash. Not gonna lie, this was actually pretty frequent, usually crashing every 1 hour of gameplay. For most people it's probably pretty annoying, but since I play the game on Ranger Hardcore, I can't use the quick save function. For this reason, I lost a ton of progress and had to replay many sections of the game. Sometimes I would lose up to 20 minutes of progress. But while I don't think that this is excusable, I can honestly say that I didn't mind replaying these parts of the game since I was thoroughly enjoying the gameplay itself. But while I could drag this video out going over every little flaw the game may have, I can't really say that any of its issues detract from my enjoyment of the game to the point where it hurts the overall experience. I think 4A Games have done an excellent job crafting a great game that offers a great mix of challenge, immersion, and storytelling. So would I recommend that you buy Metro Exodus? I'm not actually sure if I would. Despite how much I love and adore this game, I personally think that the Metro games appeal to a somewhat niche audience. I've seen many other reviewers say that Metro Exodus has clunky gunplay, a really slow pace, and a lot of micromanagement. In these reviewers' eyes, their statements are criticisms. But in my eyes, these statements are highlights. The thing that I love the most about the Metro games is that the developers have the giant hairy coconut balls to occasionally put fun factor in the backseat and let other emotions drive your engagement. It isn't fun to run out of medkits when you're about to die. It isn't fun to get spotted after sneaking past enemies for 10 minutes. It isn't fun for your gun to jam in the middle of a fight. It isn't fun to get flanked and harassed by freaky-ass spider monsters when you only have 3 bullets. And it isn't fun to spend 10 minutes scavenging for supplies before doing a single mission. But while the Metro games aren't always fun, I personally find them very engaging. The biggest lie that's often perpetuated by both gamers and game developers is that video games are meant to be fun. In reality, I think that video games are meant to be entertaining and engaging. When your favorite character in a game dies, it isn't a fun experience. But it still plays on other emotions to drive your engagement with the game world. When reviewers say the gameplay is clunky, to me that says the gunplay is challenging and tense. When reviewers say that the game moves at a slow pace, to me that means the world is worth taking in. And when reviewers say there's too much micromanagement, to me that means that the scavenging background mechanics have real impact on the gameplay. Of course, all of these criticisms are completely valid in the context of most other FPS games. But in Metro Exodus, these are the core mechanics which are used to bridge the emotional gap between the player and Artyom, and for this reason I think they are nothing short of stellar. And that to me is the main takeaway from the Metro games. The world is immersive not only because of the breathtaking visuals and audio, but because the actual gameplay mechanics do such an effective job of making you feel the same way that the characters do. But I don't want to imply that all of the fun factor has been sucked out of the game for some artsy-fartsy narrative shit, cause at the end of the day, you're still a badass Russian firing an AK at some truly ugly inhuman sons of bitches, which is pretty fucking fun in my books. There is plenty of fun to be had in Metro Exodus, but the game has the courage to appeal to other emotions as well. And this type of bravery in the modern-day video game landscape is easily worth the $80 I spent. If you're the type of player who enjoys a blend of shooter, survival, and stealth games, then I would highly recommend picking Metro Exodus up. But if you want an action-packed shooter game, then I would probably hold off for Doom, since the inherent gameplay mechanics of the Metro games will always feel awkward when trying to deliver an action-oriented experience. Anyways, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the ruins of Russia.